What's up, everybody? And how everyone's doing? So, I just want y'all to know for this stream, we're going to do a little something. Like, we're going to try to get done with the Space Marine boxes, well, the 2 starter boxes we had.
One was a starter box. This was a bonus box.
Okay, so whatever you want to call them. But we're going to do the thing. I have a TikTok now, so if you want to call them what you want to call them. After this, you want to look at that, I got a link in the description. But other than that, we're going to try and finish what we started. We're on the, hopefully, the last bit of this video's journey. And, yeah, that's about it. So, with no further ado, we're going to have to get this out there. Let's go. So, where's the orc stuff at? So,
Orcs over in here.
and all of that's Necrons?
Right here. Yep, the rest of I need.
Okay, cool, man. I got to find the mini pieces that I have.
The ones you built already?
Yeah, I think they're right here now.
Yep.
Okay, cool. We'll get this out here. So let's start building this. I don't know shit.
That's marine bits.
Wait a sec. I don't know what that meant. Okay.
We're good?
Yeah, we're good. Then something popped up. I'm like, what the heck is that? Then when I move my mouth, they're like, oh, sorry, Force 1. The Vault of Terra.
Hello and welcome to the Vaults of Terror. My name is Ed, and today we're going to be celebrating the fact that we're now at 27,500 subscribers. I was going to do this at 25,000
I don't know what these fuckers I have.
It's been a while.
What?
So, to celebrate
What do you think
this
everything's good?
new number, I have decided to do an overview video of something that
This is
everyone
what
has
you
been
do with
requesting
these
for a
guys.
very long time.
What?
Yes, today is the day
That's what we're planning to do with these guys.
of the Horus Heresy.
We'll probably do one and a half, like one and a half together.
And devastating events
Alright.
in the life of the early Imperium.
10 gods, 10 reasons.
Yep, sounds cool to me.
Brother for the domination of this new human superpower, and the results of which can still be felt in the Imperium today. Now, a bit of background to the Horus Heresy. At the time of the Horus Heresy, the Great Crusade had been reconquering the galaxy in the Imperium's name for approximately 200 years. The Emperor had rediscovered all of his lost sons, although 2 had disappeared from history at this point, and the legions were stronger than ever. The Emperor then retired to Terra, leaving Horus, his most militarily successful Primarch and beloved first discovered son, in overall command of the Crusade as its war master. Although honoured, Horus at his core doubted his abilities to command, and was unsure as to why the Emperor had abandoned the military front in order to return to Terra. And from these seeds of doubt, twisted by the powers of chaos, would the Horus Heresy grow. Now, there are several preliminary causes that led up to the Horus Heresy, and these all contributed to the ignition of the heresy in Horus, alongside the planning of the Chaos powers, which is a given at this stage. Now, first was the Emperor returning to Terra to work on the Webway project in secret, which alienated his sons, who thought he was abandoning the Great Crusade. Of course, he didn't tell his sons about the Webway project.
I like the instructions at home apparently. It works, but who cares? It works. You just make it out scratch anyway.
Yeah, very much.
Am I wrong?
Nope.
The second was the forming of the Council of Terror, which is made up of mortal human bureaucrats, mostly, whom the Astartes and the Primarchs resented taking any orders from, being genetically superior to these humans, and more of a warrior mindset than the Council, which was more interested in feeding and populating the Imperium with loyal citizens. Lastly was the severe punishment of Logar, one of the Emperor's most devoted sons, who worshipped the Emperor as a god due to his upbringing, which went against the imperial truth at the time, ironically, which was that the Emperor was not a god, and there were no gods or superpowers, and that the Imperium was governed by truth and science. Now, his worship and conversions of his conquered worlds to his religion slowed him down to an unacceptable level, and he refused to stop his worship. So, the Emperor ordered an entire world that was devoted to him to be destroyed by the Ultramarines, with the word-bearers, the Legion of Logar, to witness it. This drove Logar into a deep despair, and later into the hands of the Chaos Gods as the first fallen Primarch, igniting the plans that would eventually lead to the Horus Heresy. However, the true beginning of the Horus Heresy was when Horus was wounded on the moons of Davin by a xenos blade known as an anathema. The moon had been corrupted by Nurgle, and Horus's forces were attacked by demons from foul mists when trying to find a traitorous commander, one of Horus's old friends, in fact. Finally confronting the traitor, who was also corrupted by Nurgle, Horus was wounded by the deadly blade, and not even his superior physiology could prevent him from falling deathly ill.
Oh crap, it's
Desperate
this.
to help, his elite Astartes commanders of the Sons of Horus, known as the Mournival, took Horus to the Serpent Lodge on Davin itself, a planet on which the moon orbited. The lodge, of course, was filled with mutant psychers who promised they could cleanse Horus's wounds. However, this was a trick that the corrupt word-bearers chaplain Erebus had planned. Whilst Horus was being healed, his soul was cast into the warp to show Horus visions of the past, when he was being gestated in the Emperor's lands, and the future, which was actually the Imperium today. Now, Horus was shown the future that we know of in the Imperium, where the Emperor was cast down, and the Imperium began to worship him as a god. However, Erebus hid this from Horus, and tried to convince him that this is what would happen if he won the galaxy for the Emperor, that he would be forgotten, and other sons which were more beloved by the people would be raised above him.
Oh good, now why can't I get the glue to come out?
Now, this excited a jealousy inside Horus, which he had not really known existed, but did exist between him and Sanguinius, his other closest and more angelic brother, who was, although not as much a military genius, was one of the most beloved of the Primarchs in the Imperium due to his more angelic nature. Now, this future was one of the most convincing parts of Erebus's vision. However, he had not revealed himself at this point, and was hiding his true identity. However, Magnus the Red, Horus's brother Primarch and an incredibly powerful psyker, detected this attempt to try and convert Horus, and interceded in the vision, trying to convince Horus not to turn away from the Emperor,
Oh dude,
and
this
that what
thing's
was being
broken.
told was a lie. He even revealed Erebus's true identity to Horus, and revealed that the nature of the corruption he would be agreeing to if he decided to turn against the Emperor. Now, this is the crux of the heresy, and if, of course, Horus had believed Magnus at this point, then the heresy would never have happened, and it would have likely been crushed in its infancy. However, Erebus's work had been done, and Horus had been convinced that he no longer should follow the Emperor, and should instead invest himself in greater powers. So, he cast Magnus's offer off, and decided to rebel against the Emperor, and join with the powers of chaos to overthrow his father. Now that he had been corrupted, Horus needed to sway the legions in order to fight against the Emperor. Now, almost his primary concern were his brother Primarchs. Now, the first to be turned was Angron of the World Eaters, Fulgrim of the Emperor's Children, and Moritarian of the Death Guard, whose attitudes and flaws made them susceptible to the powers of chaos. This is not to mention Logar, who had already been corrupted years before. Conrad Kurz of the Night Lords, Alfarius and Megaron of the Alpha Legion, and Perturabos, Iron Warriors, who also joined Horus against the Imperium, although their reasons were more mortal about rivalries and feeling no love for the Imperium, rather than wanting to worship chaos directly. Now, it was at this time that Magnus tried to warn the Emperor of Horus's betrayal, using forbidden sorcery to try and breach the walls of terror and deliver his message, despite such practices being banned by the Emperor himself at the proclamation of Nicaea. Now, his attempt to breach the wards worked, but instead of being able to deliver his message, demons poured through the breach and began attacking the new webway the Emperor had been trying to create. Distressed by this attack, Magnus retreated without delivering his message. Now, he retreated to his homeworld of Prospero, which was then attacked by the Space Wolves under the Emperor's orders, because the Emperor now believed that Magnus was a traitor defying his orders and consorting with chaos. And this led to the burning of Prospero, which will have its own video at another time, but of course did almost destroy the Thousand Suns Legion, who were Magnus's soldiers, and eventually led them into the arms of the Chaos Gods. Now, Horus also knew at this time that some of his brothers would never join him. Lionel Johnson, the Dark Angels, Sanguinius of the Blood Angels, and Gulliman of the Ultramarines were considered by Horus to be some of his greatest threats, being some of the most beloved and tactically brilliant Primarchs. Some were sent away on missions far from terror, with him still in the guise of the loyal Crusade leader, then devised traps to keep him from returning to terror in the event of a siege, and possibly killing his brothers before they could join against him. Now, Rorgal Dawn and his Imperial Fists and Khan's White Scars were too close to terror to contact without arousing suspicion despite their loyalty. The others, Corax's Raven Guard, Vulcan's Salamanders, and Russ's Space Wolves, were also considered too loyal, and Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands was attempted to be corrupted by Fulgrim. However, he of course was too loyal and rejected Fulgrim's offer out of hand. Now knowing who would support them and who was against them, the traitor legions decided to start purging their ranks in order to be a united front against the Imperium. This led to the scouring of Istvan III. Now, this was the attempt to scour their legions of the Loyal Marines. What happened was that the Loyal Marines were sent down as the first wave, then the planet was virus-bombed, and the Loyalists were mostly destroyed. Although some survived on the world, under rubble or hidden away, whilst others fled aboard the ship the Eisenstein to warn the Imperium of the War Master's treachery, although some of these Marines would later come to form the core of the Grey Knights, the demon-hunting Astartes of the Inquisition. Now, it was also at this point that the traitorous elements of the Imperial Army, the Mechanicus with their Titan legions, and the other Imperial forces defected to join Horus, forming into the army he would later use to support his invasion of Terra. It was also at this point that the tech priests of Mars descended into a civil war, with the Dark Mechanicus attempting to overthrow their traditional order and follow Horus with his ideas of change and invention as opposed to the dogmatic ways of the Dark Mechanicus. Although this is something, again, that will be dealt with in its own video. Now, one of the most crucial and brutal elements of the heresy came next, which was the drop site massacre of Istvan V. Now, this was an ambush by the traitors against the Loyalists. The drop site massacre was where the Raven Guard, the Iron Hands, the Salamanders, Night Lords, Iron Warriors, Word Bearers, and Alpha Legion attacked the traitors, and in overwhelming force would destroy the Sons of Horus, the World Eaters, the Death Guard, and the Emperor's children who were arrayed against them. Unfortunately for the Raven Guard, Salamanders, and Iron Hands, their fellow Loyalists were in fact all traitors, and not long after landing, these three Loyalist legions were surrounded by 8 traitor legions, ripping them apart. Now, the details will be mentioned again in a later video, but needless to say, the Loyalists were completely devastated and lost a huge number of their men, with only the bare minimum escaping. To compound this, Pharos Manus was killed by the demonically possessed Fulgrim, the first Primarch officially to die in the Imperium, and Vulcan was captured by Conrad Kurz. Only Korax of the Raven Guard escaped, and he was almost unhinged by the horror he had witnessed and the death of his legion. Now, with these threats removed, or at least greatly reduced, the path to Terra was almost open for the traitors. The Ultramarines were still embattled at Calth, and the Space Wolves were bogged down, and Dark Angels as well were too far to help the Imperium at this time. Only the Imperial Fists on Terra, the White Scars, and the recently returned
I got text-to-speech on this time. So I can put like, it's proof like I like this.
Now, what came next was many years of warfare, which I will, of course, again summarize in a later video, specifically about what
George N.D. Reality.
However, the next major conflict and the most important part of the Horus Heresy was the Siege of Terra.
The Emperor is with us.
The end of the Horus Heresy. Now, the siege began with the arrival of the Traitors' fleet, blasting past the outer planets of the solar system and restocking near Mars, which was still locked in their civil war. When they
I gotta figure out
arrived
what's in
at
this
Terra, the immense
box
fleet,
report.
led by Horus's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit,
Oh, those are mega knobs.
defenses and began landing
Well,
troops.
the problem is like
Now,
I don't, because I was still instructing the home, I gotta just look them up real quick.
died in the siege, be they Astartes, Titan, or human soldiers.
I'm just trying to get like basic concepts of what I'm building
I
here.
know, no, look. This kid's right here, they're mega knobs. They're termies.
Terminators?
Yeah.
What's this?
Knobs.
Regular knobs?
Yes, you can just outfit them what you want. Or,
I was doing basic warfare bullshit, so I forgot what's going on here.
yeah. Pretty much, the guy who is the boss now of the group needs to have something to signify him out, like a power claw, or a nice little shooter.
Alright, cool, so this guy's gonna have the base. The guy with the smallest base is gonna be the leader.
Now, this war was almost
Because he's technically smart.
Yeah. About what happened. However, many times
This is literally how I'm doing this, is copy out the parts.
What?
I'm not overlaying. I go like, huh.
1 little, 2 little, 3 little, gone!
Well, it's because they actually have locks for body and the parts that match up, so I'm literally going like,
now, by day 55, the powers were still holding, but the traitors had been bled almost dry themselves. And Horus received intelligence
We need something to play, he's going to join our stupidity.
Terra to reinforce the Loyalists. No longer able to wait to lay siege to the planet, Horus lowered the shields.
Anyone who's watching, you can just say hi. We're not gonna bite much.
I may have to go get my phone.
Go get your phone. I don't care. I can sit here. I can be by myself. I'm a big boy, according to Joe people.
Let me have you cries, guys.
Woo! Okay.
However, their teleport was disrupted, and the parts of the tribe scattered. It was Sanguinius who found Horus first, and fought him alone while still away from the battle below. However, Horus was of course empowered by chaos, and even at full strength, Sanguinius would have had a struggle to actually defeat Horus in combat. Horus, of course, tried to convert his once closest brother, and when that actually failed, he brutally killed Sanguinius, throttling him with his power claw or snapping his neck. Sanguinius' only victory was to inflict a chink in Horus' armor, although if this was physical or mental, we don't actually know at this stage. Now, the Emperor was the next to arrive on the bridge where this conflict was happening. Now, the combat between Horus and the Emperor was huge. Again, this will be described in the video relating to the Battle of Terra. However, this was essentially two demigods battling against one another. Eventually, the Emperor did defeat Horus, but was wounded almost unto death by this conflict. It was Dawn that arrived next, finding them in the ruins of the bridge. Distraught by the death of his angelic brother and the near death of his father, he took both the dead body and the nearly dead one back to Terra via teleport and left Horus's corpse to rot on the bridge. Horus gone, the traitors quickly fell and were pushed back to the Eye of Terror in a time known as the Great Scouring. Dawn entombed the Emperor on the Golden Throne to hold the gate closed against the demons on the other side, and he, along with the last remaining loyal Primarchs and the remaining Council of Terror, began to rebuild the Imperium, purging the traitors from the ranks, restructuring the government into the High Lords of Terror, amongst other things, and splitting the Legion.
Since you know who has you on YouTube, I just said Gorgeous Live.
The age of the Imperium began. Now, I hope that's been a comprehensive overview of what actually happened during the Horus Heresy. Again, I've said it is quite brief because I do intend to do a full series on the Horus Heresy in the future.
The Horus
Heresy. So long since I started this channel, I've mentioned it so many times that people did need to hear exactly what happened during the Horus Heresy and why it was
a lot of little bitches got killed. Done.
Imperial history. And so, I hope that's covered all my bases so far. If you have a question or if you have anything else you'd like to ask about the Horus Heresy or anything relating to the
How do you spell Horus Heresy?
in the comment section below or send me a personal message. If you'd like to ask more detailed questions or you'd like to
I'm wondering I can cheat, technically.
you can go to the box relay,
That was a joke,
which is populated by many people who understand the law and are able to answer your questions and just interact on a fan level. So, I hope you've enjoyed the videos today. Videos will resume more regularly soon. We'll be starting doing the videos from Round Up the Space Marines, so they'll be done. And we'll also be continuing with our Imperial Guard videos. So, I hope you've enjoyed the video today. See you next time on the Vaults of Terror.
Hey, dude, look at one thing on Vault of Terra. We're going to do my favorite Space Marine chapter. You know me.
Malice.
Sons of Space Marine, not Chaos Space Marine.
Hello and welcome to the Vaults of Terror. My name is Ed, and today we're going to be starting something as opposed to continuing something, because today we are going to be starting on the Horus Heresy series. Yes, I know I've been promising this for probably about 2 years, but I think right now is a good time, so we'll get started with everything. So today we will be talking about the Unification Wars and the Great Crusade, which did come before the Horus Heresy, but was the catalyst that started the whole thing, so starting here is probably a good idea. So to start, of Terror. My name is Ed, and today we're continuing our Space Marines Chapters videos by having a look at the Legion of the Damned. Now, lots of people have requested this chapter, and some may be confused as to who they actually are. Now, the Legion of the Damned are not a specific chapter. They are actually a force of Adeptus Astartes who don't fall within the Imperial command structure, and most people in the Imperium would think them more a myth or a legend rather than an actual fighting force. Now, what I'll do today is just go through a bit of their history and their background, because unfortunately there's not as much lore surrounding them as there really should be, but we'll look at that in a bit more detail later on. Now, the Legion of the Damned is recognisable by their black battle plate with flaming details, along with other detailing in bone, and a lot of their iconography reflects skulls or skull shapes. Now, their battle cry is nothing, because they actually go to war in complete silence. No noise is ever heard from them other than the firing of the bolters and the sound of their other weapons. Now, they appear as ghostly and insubstantial when on the battlefield, and usually appear when Imperial forces are in great need, arriving from nowhere and leaving just as suddenly, not ever having said a single word. Now, their origins are officially shrouded in mystery in the Imperium, although some link them to the long-lost Firehawks chapter, which I will explain in greater detail later on. Now, the Legion itself has been infected by a condition which erodes their minds and withers their bodies, but it also gives them immense strength. Every member is on the road to an ingloriously insane death as their body and mind is slowly corrupted, and although combat accelerates their condition towards a berserker fury, they seek to continue their fight for the Imperium. Now, just to go into their organisation really quickly, they're actually without any formal organisation. They all consider each other equals, and their primary tactic is to literally flatten the enemy, then leave as quickly as they have arrived. Now, they operate unusually, as they do not report to any member of the Imperial High Command, as I've already said. However, their condition also increases their psychic senses, which has led for them to actually take cues for their operations from the Emperor's Tarot, which is a method of predicting the future used by psychics in the Imperium. Now, because of their heightened psychic abilities, it means that the Legion of the Damned can actually go where they are needed most, and it is renowned for them to appear just in a nick of time to save an Imperial force before departing from the scene. Now, their history, as I've said, is a little bit insubstantial, but there is a lot of evidence which links them to the Firehawks. The history of the Firehawks is that they actually were founded during the Age of Apostasy, during the reign of Gorge Vatndire, and they actually took part in the Second Siege of Terror, where they helped liberate the Imperium from Gorge Vatndire's tyrannical reign and allowed the High Lords of Terror to be restored to their rightful place. Now, after that, they served with great distinction until the year 963 of Millennium 41, where they were sent to the Crow's World subsector to fight against Elder Pirates. Their entire chapter, including the chapter's mobile space fortress, Rapturous Rex, made a successful warp jump from the Piraeus system 129 years to the Crow's World. Their journey was meant to take 12 hours, but the fleet never arrived. 20 years after the event, the chapter was officially declared lost in the warp, and they were presumed to have been destroyed by the entities that exist there. The bell of lost souls on Terra rang 1,000 times to honour the loss of so many honourable Marines. Now, in the year 986 Millennium 41, a routine Imperial patrol passed the orbital system of Jakor Tal. Now, they found the orcs had been completely destroyed, and there was no explanation as to how that had actually happened. This began to happen in other systems, with the enemies of the Imperium being completely destroyed.
I was making sure that one TikTok didn't get taken down.
And this continued for over a year. Then, a patrol ship in the Maran subsector narrowly avoided a collision with a spacecraft at the Sift jump point. The patrol ship was entering the Sift system from the jump point, whereas the unidentified craft was actually leaving. After the ship had actually left, the patrol found 2 long cylinders left behind, which turned out to be unadorned coffins. Now, the coffins were shipped back to Terra and opened by
What's up, anyone watching?
Now, the coffins themselves were identified as belonging to the Absolute, one of the spacecraft that vanished with the Firehawks fleet. Inside were the armoured remains of 2 Space Marines. Heraldry was not on record, but the serial numbers from the coffins and the armour tallied with equipment issued to the Firehawks. Unfortunately, their bodies were in such an advanced state of decay that actually IDing them was impossible. Now, a year later, an Imperial planet was under siege by a vast horde of orcs. However, relief suddenly arrived in the form of several hundred black armoured astartes that arrived without warning and departed just as quickly. This time, they left behind a banner, a gnarled chapter of the Firehawks. Inscribed upon it was the motto,
George N.D. Reality said, "Say hi."
For the Emperor beyond the point of
I don't want to put that on there.
Now, just to step out of the law very quickly, that doesn't actually mean that in Latin. Now, we know that the Imperial High Catholic is not the same as Latin. However, if you wanted to make it accurate to a Latin phrase, the phrase would actually read, Dedicato Imperator Ultra Articulo Mortis, which actually means for the Emperor beyond the point of death. I believe the original phrase actually means to our orders beyond the point of death, which could actually tally, but I think for the Emperor does sound a little bit better. As well as the banner, there was actually a data recorder and sundry other sealed items, which were all also shipped back to Terra. The next known contact with the chapter was on the cemetery world of Ceturus Minor, where they showed up just before the Holocaust Blood Crusade attained its ultimate victory, swiftly annihilating the entire Blood Crusade and leaving no enemy survivors. Now, the system defense ships in orbit report that shortly before the unexpected reinforcements arrived, a vessel resembling a starboard appeared in the system and began systematically obliterating the Chaos Armada. Now, this could be the Rapturous Rex, which was the mobile space fortress of the Firehawks. However, there was no identification given, and the chapter left soon after that. Now, there have been a host of other smaller conflicts with the Legion of them at this time. However, I won't go through every individual one because a lot of them are actually quite old lore and we're not too sure how accurate they are in the current universe. Now, some of you will be wondering, what were those sundry items that were left behind on that Imperial world? Well, actually, the data recorder was decoded and it was found to reveal the Firehawks' fate, which probably confirms the Legion of the Damned are actually descendants of the Firehawks. Now, what the recorder revealed was that when the fleet was making its warp jump, a storm sprung up and actually destroyed most of the fleet, with only one craft surviving. By using a daring warp exit maneuver, the craft left warp space, emerging far into the galactic east and thousands of light years off course beyond the light of xnoenos. Only 200 of the Firehawks' brethren survived the storm. All their genes had been lost, all their initiates and mortal crew were killed, and most of the chapter's command had been lost on the ships that were destroyed. To make matters worse, the brethren changed. This change became more obvious over the next few months. Their skin began to blacken and blister, flesh began to fester and putrefy, and slowly the Marines began to decay alive. Now, it's clear that the Marines have been exposed to some sort of unexplained and incurable infection, which continued to devour them in the many years it took to return to the Imperium. As you may expect, those who returned to the Imperium were no longer sane. Pain and despair had actually driven them beyond the point of rationality. Now they wished for death, release from their malady. However, they were still loyal Marines of the Emperor, and they would die to defend his realm. So began their war, with a new heraldry under a new name that most befitted their fate. All their ranks were removed, and all brothers were made equal before death, for surely now they were the Legion of the Damned. Now that's everything I wanted to say on the Legion of the Damned. There's not much more lore out there, and there are a few other bits and pieces, but not anything that really gives weight to the fate of this chapter. Now, if you'd like a little bit more in depth on the Firehawks, do let me know. But other than that, that's everything I wanted to say on the Legion of the Damned today. Don't forget to vote in the comments below for your next chapter. I think it's currently...
What happened to this guy? One question.
He just dropped off. Don't know. Same thing, internal struggle or something personal happened. It's just...
I think he had a hard time with his email. So. His first email got taken down. Which is the problem, because without the email, you can't gain access to his account.
Hello and welcome to Vaults of Terror. My name is Ed, and today we're going to be continuing our Space Marines chapters videos by having a look at the Ultramarines.
Oh,
go back to Horus Heresy.
yes.
Out there that
We don't want to do Ultra Smurfs. We want to do Ultra Badass motherfuckers.
They also feature heavily on a lot of the box art for the models that Games Workshop produces. So what I'm going to...
Don't remind us.
Hello and welcome to the Vaults of Terror. My name is Ed, and today we're going to be starting something as opposed to continuing something, because today we are going to be starting on the Horus Heresy series. Yes, I know I've been promising this for probably about 2 years, but I think right now is a good time, so we will get started with everything. So today we will be talking about the Unification Wars and the Great Crusade, which did come before the Horus Heresy, but was the catalyst that started the whole thing, so starting here is probably a good idea. So to start, in the beginning, before even the Great Crusade started, was a conflict known as the Unification Wars, which is also known as the Wars of Unification. It was the name for the conflicts on Terra at the end of the Age of Strife. Now, it was led by the soon-to-be crowned Emperor of Mankind, and they aimed to once again unite Terra under one power after 5,000 years of chaos, known as the Age of Strife. Now, its ultimate goal was to create a platform from which the Emperor could launch his Great Crusade to unite humanity throughout the cosmos. Now, this was a time when the Emperor led his Thunder Warriors personally. Now, the Thunder Warriors were his own genetically modified super soldiers and the precursors to the Space Marines. He led these forces against the fractured techno-barbarians of old Earth, allied with a clan known as the Terrawat clan, who had advanced war machines that aided the Emperor's armies. He spread what has become known as the Imperial Truth across the planet, enforcing atheism and attempting to remove the last vestiges of superstition from the hearts of mankind. Now, there were a few battles in the Unification Wars that I will go through another time. However, I do have a list of nations and powers that existed at the time on Earth. Now, there was an area called Albia. I don't know exactly where it is, but that was ruled by the Warlord clans. There was also a place called Albion, which is based around the historic British Isles. There was also the Archimede Empire, who swore loyalty to the Emperor early and avoided much of the conflict of the Unification Wars. They were monarchical but peaceful, and also had a relatively pure human gene stock with few mutations or anomalies, so were actually the source of many recruits for the early Legio Astartes program, providing soldiers mainly for the Legion 15, also known later as the Thousand Sons. Even under the Imperial Truth, some superstitions remained in the Archimede Empire, mainly believing in the mystical power of their ancestors and using emblems of their greatest kings as wards to protect themselves from harm. Now, another nation was Boeotia, holding out against the unification for quite some time. On the surface, they actually recognized the Emperor's dominance, but using diplomatic loopholes, the monarchy, in the name of the family Yeselti, was able to keep power in their own hands for over 150 years, saying they would integrate into the Emperor's new forces at their own speed and with dignity. However, the Emperor's patience had a limit, and eventually the Emperor's armies armies invaded, and the new Thousand Sons Legion was sent to quash their rebellious ways. On a side note, the land was also known for having a very heavy industrial presence and at least one buried shrine to old human gods from before the Age of Strife. Now, there was a place called Ethnarchy, which was ruled by eugenists based in the Caucasus Wastes, which was based on Caucasus itself, which is an area of land between the Black and Caspian Seas today. There's Hid Brazil, which was based in South America, the Pan-Pacific Empire, which was based obviously in the Pacific Ocean. There was Ursh, which is based in Central Asia, the Terawat clan, which ruled from the Ural Mountains. There was the Indonesian bloc, and the Sargon Enclave. Because of all these different nations needed to be united, the combat did go on for some time during the Unification Wars, but eventually did wind up with the Emperor being the sole power on the planet. It also ended up creating a number of military formations as a result of the war, including the xnoenos to Chiliad, who I will mention at another time. One of the last warlords to fall during the closing days of the war was Dalmoth Kin. Despite his defeat, the Emperor allowed his descendant, Pharaoh Saishar, to remain within the new imperial government, although the actions of Malkador the Sigillite ensured that Saishar never sat on the Council of Terror. After the Unification Wars came what we all are here for, the Great Crusade. Now, it began in approximately 798 millennium 30 and continued on to 5 millennium 31. And it was the first rise of humanity after the downfall of its galactic spanning empire during the Age of Strife. Now, the Emperor was still loosely considered a living person at this time, leading a great crusade out to the stars and reconquered a large portion of humanity's old domains before the Great Crusade ended with the Horus Heresy. Now, in order to achieve his vision, the Emperor created the Primarch Project using his own DNA as a base to clone 20 superhuman sons to lead his forces across the cosmos. He used the Primarchs also as a template for the gene seeds, which he could use to mutate common men, or children, into superhuman soldiers, in a more controlled way than he had with his Thunder Warriors, who will be mentioned in depth at another time. He managed to retrieve the 20 gene seeds from the Primarchs when the Gods of Chaos managed to discover his project and stole the 20 Primarchs, casting them out into the galaxy far from the Emperor's reach at that time. Even with this setback, the Emperor continued with his Legio Astartes program, joining them with the Imperial Army, the Titan Legions, the Legio Cybernetica, the Sisters of Silence, and the Custodian Guards to create the greatest fighting force the galaxy had seen in thousands of years. Now, it was also at this time that the warp storms that had plagued the galaxy for many thousands of years abated due to the birth of the Chaos God Slanesh, allowing the Emperor to begin his plans for his new Great Crusade. To start this, he also provided his new Space Marine legions with the Mark II power armor to assist them in coming conflicts. He quickly conquered the industrial powerhouses of Mars and Luna, and then liberated Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune from their alien overlords. He then left the system entirely after defeating and destroying the false world of Sedna. After leaving Sol, the Emperor's first task was to seek out his lost Primarchs while spreading the name of his new Imperium. Over the next few centuries, he reclaimed his sons, travelling to a vast variety of worlds to discover where they had been cast, and reuniting them with the legions he had created from their genetic structure. Slowly, the galaxy was coming under the rule of the Imperium and the Pax Imperialis. Thousands of worlds were liberated from their tyrannical and false rulers. The religions and dogma that had sprung up in the time since the beginning of the Age of Strife were outlawed, and multitudes of Xenos races were encountered and driven from the realms of man, both old and new. Populations where humanity had fallen into corruption or mutation were mostly exterminated, with only a few stable mutant strains being allowed to survive in the service of the Emperor, such as the Squats, Ogrins, and the Ratlings. Now, the original thrust of the Great Crusade was divided into three parts, one led by the Emperor himself, one by Horus, who was one of the first Primarchs to be found, and one by Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands. As each Primarch was found, they were assigned to their own legion, dividing their legions again as they spread out across the galaxy. Soon the demand for Space Marines was outstripping the supply of them. Because of this, the accelerated gene culture was developed for the gene seed, developing it in a fraction of the time that it usually required to grow. However, this led to subtle flaws in the gene seed derived from the Primarch's own genetic code being greatly magnified, leading to mutations and afflictions like the Red Thirst and the mutations of the Space Wolves into Wolfen. Once in full swing, the Great Crusade lasted exactly 200 years, and at the peak there were nearly 4,300 expeditionary fleets travelling across the galaxy, conquering new regions for the Emperor and the Imperium. At its apex was the victory the Emperor and Horus achieved over a massive war of the Eleanor Crusade. After this victory, the Emperor declared Horus the War Master of all his armies, which basically meant Supreme Commander, and returned to Terra to commence his work on one of his most secret projects, which was actually to create his own webway, a human-built webway which could link into the existing Eldar webway and allow them to travel across the stars without the need of starships, which was one of the major causes of death in the Imperium at the time, apart from the wars that they were fighting. However, he didn't tell anybody about this project apart from a few select personnel and parts of the Mechanicus, and so it did lead to many, including his Primarchs who were in the dark about this, having second thoughts about their loyalties, but I will get onto that later. Now, towards the end of the Crusade, there was a political and bureaucratic consolidation. Many of the Emperor's armies were now garrisoned across the galaxy rather than being crusading forces, and some were chafing under these duties after centuries of warfare. A large bureaucratic organisations, overseen by Malkador the Sigillite and the Council of Terror, formed to manage the now conquered new territory. They clashed with the Legion repeatedly, and tensions developed when the Legions discovered the Council would rule over them, rather than the Legions getting ruling status as conquerors of these worlds. Without the Emperor to keep them in check, the Primarchs' friendly rivalries also developed into feuds, with some Primarchs becoming intolerant of each other, whilst others secluding themselves in isolation like their father. Magnus the Red of the Thousand Suns isolated himself, while Logar of the Wordbearers began worshipping chaos after clashing with the Ultramarines and Guilliman, whilst Leland Russ clashed with Lionel Johnson and Angron over different matters entirely. Raven was shunned and envious of Rogal Dawn, and Dawn was even attacked by surprise by Conrad Kurz after a disagreement, leaving Dawn injured and unconscious. All this would underline the conflicts in the Horus Heresy in the years to come. Now, there were several noteworthy battles and campaigns of the Great Crusade, which I will go through now, although I will describe in detail another time. The first was the pacification of Luna, which was the first major battle of the Great Crusade. And then there was the battle of
so these will be their own video because I can't do them without the instructions unless I can bring them up.
Where Horus brought the world 6319.
We'll use here in chat if you want.
It was the fall of the Lords of Grandinal, where the 413th Expeditionary Team and Ferrus Manus subdued the advanced human world of Grandinal. There was the Battle of Gyrus Tharapin, where the Emperor Rogal Dawn, Mortarion, and Horus defeated one of the most powerful Orc war bosses in recorded history, Garkle Black.
Are you ready for your birthday?
Where the Death Guard conquered the Vault of Gilspar. There was the cleansing of Leoran, where the Emperor's children annihilated the Leader. There was the Golgotha slaughter, where the World Eaters battled the Brotherhood of Ruin and Orcs on Sarin. There was the Battle of Gate 42, where Horus led 4 legions and a major assault which saw heavy Raven Guard losses. There was, of course, the Eleanor Crusade, where the Emperor and Horus defeated the empire of the Orc war boss, Urlak Urg. There was the Battle of 4716, where the World Bearers attacked that world. There was the Disbrax conflict, where the Iron Hands and the children battled the Xenos Confederation known as the Disbrax. There was the Moral Murder, where Horus and Sacraments battled the Megaloratids. There was the Interrex conflict, where Horus invades the advanced human civilization known as the Interrex. There was the Battle of Tavian's Moon, where Horus unwittingly falls into the Word-Bearer's trap and falls to chaos. Finally, there was the Auretian Technocracy War, which was secretly dedicated to overthrow the Emperor by Horus. And these were many of the conflicts that happened during the Great Crusade. Obviously, that's not all of them, and that would be a page 1,000 miles long. So that was all I have to say on that area, but I will go into detail about many of these conflicts in later videos. The Crusade ended, as many of you know, with the Horus Heresy. As far as history is concerned, the Horus Heresy began with the virus bombing of Istvan III by Horus, now corrupted by chaos, signaling his rebellion to the Imperium, although he said he may have wanted to keep it secret.
What? Pow!
Now, loyalists were called back to defend Terra, but few were able to return before great warp storms arose, cutting off large areas of the Imperium from one another. The Ultramarines fought Corferon of the Word-Bearers in the Ultramar system. The Space Wolves sacked the Thousand Suns' homeworld Prospero, and the White Scars were bogged down by the Kondorax campaign, as well as the Dark Angels fighting a civil war on Caliban. With the Emperor hidden for some unknown reason, fighting against demonic incursions in the bowels of the Imperial Palace actually, the Imperium lacked solid leadership and began to decline. The brief recovery from the darkness that the Great Crusade offered was gone after the Horus Heresy, and with his interment on the Golden Throne and Ascension after his battle with Horus, in the eyes of the Imperium, he rose to godhood, and the Imperium of Man began to slowly slide into war, decadence, slavery, violence, and destruction for the next 10,000 years. So that's the end of my video on the Great Crusade. Next up will be some of the conflicts I mentioned today, and we will continue on to talk more about the Primarchs, the legions, the emperor, and then go into a little bit more about
You saw a new video for
if there's anything you specifically want to see a video on, do let me know in the
Oh,
comments
about
section.
the new Garo?
And his sword.
Yeah, which I'm looking at that. It's not Excalibur.
Don't worry.
Yeah, but you gotta
And
remember.
also, if you have any comments
No.
for me that you want to ask,
Why not? John has
either
Excalibur.
send me a personal message or
That's
you
the
can
line.
just ask in the comment section below.
Well, you gotta remember, it's all
I
theory.
know.
Which is the
I was curious about that because I was like, okay, no, I am curious because they don't even talk about much about Nagari Garo.
Yeah.
Which after I read his history up in the Horus Heresy books, I was like, okay, I like this fucker.
Yeah. He's technically dead now, right?
Technically yes.
Or,
By age.
Yeah.
As far as I know, he
Hello and welcome to Vaults of Terror.
combat.
My name is Ed, and today
He was able to get to
we're
Titan.
continuing our Horus
Or he's
Heresy
probably
videos
currently in
with
the
a
work
quick look
for.
at the Primarchs. Now, this will be an overview of the Primarchs, their individual videos.
Remember how he said he took a couple of Marines to train the Grey Knights?
Yeah.
They're all part of Daniel Garo's group, the Knight Errants. Because Garo, being a Knight Errant, made two groups.
Heartier and larger than any other human save the Emperor himself.
Fuck, I can't remember his other part, but the Knight Errants, pretty much all the ones who are Knight Errants went to Titan to do one thing. Hey, hello, you're become badasses. The other groups that were Black Shield and Loyalist Traitors became part of the Death Watch Corps.
And there the Emperor laid the foundation for the Primarch's creation. Now, Ingethal, the Ascended, a Chaos Demon, said that the Emperor used forbidden technology and warp sciences to create his sons. And Eldrad Ulfran, Chief Farseer of the Elder Craft world of Uthway, said that dark power was used in the creation of the Primarchs. It is even rumoured that the Emperor used some of the godlike power he gained on the planet
one thing you want to try and do,
the technology to bring them
Crusade
into
or
being.
whatever.
However, the Chaos Gods stole the Primarchs from the
Crusade
laboratory
game
before they were
or
fully
Winter
grown,
White?
creating a
Like we
warp
still want to do the
vortex
APOC
that
game?
enabled them to
We
disappear
still want to do the 8th
planets
game
that would
birthday,
one
but
day become part of the
the other
Imperium,
one you want to try and
possibly
do.
tampering with the
You want to try and do
Primarchs
that
themselves
after
as
your
they were
birthday?
scattered. It's actually theorized that this was
Probably,
a
probably. I
word-bearers
get
led
any
by
new
Army
minis gonna be doing one
were
thing
sent
for the
back
game,
in
birthday
time
game.
to destroy the killer fields that protected the labs, allowing the
Plus,
Chaos
we
Gods to take the
kinda need the
Primarchs
Codex
before they
Marine
were
to do one
born
thing.
from their growth tanks. It's unsure if the
Or
Emperor
like,
actually
well,
allowed this to happen,
we're
as
get the
theorized he
opinion,
may
it's
have.
gonna
However,
get
the
that.
evidence is quite rocky as
Yeah.
it's based on chaos visions and not on actual observations. Now, landing on planets across the galaxy, the Emperor's children emerged from their tanks to find themselves in a multitude of different and distinct civilizations. Now, the Emperor's psychic power allowed him to know they were alive, but he could not yet reach his children or know exactly where they were. So he used the genetic material from his Primarchs and created the gene seed of the first 20 legions of the Adeptus Astartes, using them as a foundation.
Actually, I like telling people, they tell me, the Emperor wasn't no one famous in Earth's history. Yeah, according to he was a lot of people, technically.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the Primarchs quickly integrated into the worlds on which they landed, all growing rapidly within a handful of years into powerful and knowledgeable men.
So after we done with this man, we're going to try and make that TikTok again.
When returned to the Emperor, he was usually happy with the changes that
The
they had
TikTok
made
we
to
do with
their
that thing
planets,
over there?
and most Astartes legions took these worlds as their
So
new
when we
homeworlds,
get that, when we doing this, we're going to try and redo that real quick. Then
basis.
I can go
Now,
home
the first of the Primarchs
and
to be
try
found
and
was Horus, apparently
start
quite
streaming
some time
for
before
you
the Primarchs.
on
And
watch.
his martial skill and tactical brilliance combined with a high charisma led him to become one of the Emperor's most favoured sons. On rediscovery, many of the Primarchs somehow recognised their father on sight, immediately pledging their loyalty unto him. However, a few, Leman Russ, Ferrus Manus and Vulcan, only followed him after beating him in a traditional contest on their world. Angron, the Primarch of the World Eaters, refused to be taken from the planet at all and was abducted from his homeworld, which some say he still resented even during the Great Crusade. Now, in order, their discovery was Horus, Leman Russ, one of the lost Primarchs, Ferrus Manus, Fulgrim, Vulcan, Rorgul Dawn, Robert Williman, Magnus the Red, Sanguinius, Lionel Johnson, Perturabo, Mortarion, Logar, Shageti Khan, Conrad Kurz, Angron, Corax, one of the lost Primarchs, and Alfarius. Eventually, the
I think Conrad Kurz is like the best one.
plunged into the Horus heresy after Horus was corrupted by chaos, with 9 on each side of the conflict.
What I got for a brief summary, I got to make my favorite ones is Comrade Kurz,
as the heresy ended, and shortly afterwards, most of the Primarchs ended
Mortarion.
up dying or
Because
vanishing.
I know how they got that idea for. But to me, Conrad Kurz like, do you make Batman better? How we put him in 40K, give him powers to the arm, make him wait, make him have psychic powers. Oh, he's also driven mad by his own powers.
The Alpha Legion. Unbeknownst to many, the Lion also still lives.
I get their comments everyone. How can I start Comrade Kurz? Yes.
The planet of Caliban.
Batman?
So
Yes.
that's everything I have
Predator.
to say on the Primarchs and
with a little bit of bang.
I'm sorry this video is so short, but unfortunately,
Why? He takes trophies.
going on in my life.
You take trophies, but you gotta remember, they weren't like trophies to scare people. It was like throwing like, I killed this dude. What are you gonna do about it?
So now
I
that's
know.
all
Is
done.
that skull on
I
you?
should be putting
Yes.
out
Who
videos
was
a
it?
bit more
The guy who
regularly.
shoplifted.
One thing I will say is
No
that
bigger
if
asshole.
you have anything you
That's
want to say
on
in the
you?
comments
Yes.
section,
Who
do
was
let
it?
me
You
know.
know that guy who was
And
the
I'll be happy
rapist,
to move on.
murder dude from like 2
Anyway,
weeks ago?
that's everything I
Yeah.
had to say today.
Thank you.
You for listening to this extended advertisement section. And
I just think it's funny like how you took over that world.
in the comment section below, or
He
send me a
just
personal
really walked in there like,
message. So,
okay,
that's
y'all,
everything
I just
today.
killed,
See you
I
next time
killed, I
on the Vaults of
broke
Terror.
down crime and everything. I'm gonna take over the world. Who has an objection? Please think about this. I will kill you. We surrender. Cool.
Hello and welcome to the Vaults of Terror. My name is Ed, and today we're going to be looking
My name
at
is
the Primarch,
Ed.
specifically
Ed.
the First Legion's Primarch, known as Lion L. Johnson. Now we will be going through all the Primarchs in order, starting with Legion 1 and going all the way up to Legion 20, although we will, for now, skip Legion 2 and Legion 11, as they will have their own separate video after all the others. So, on to Lion Johnson. Now, Lion Johnson is the Primarch of the Dark
What the fuck am I
Angels,
doing?
also known as the First Legion.
Dun, dun,
He
dun,
was
dun,
later known as the
dun.
Lion, or just the
I want to
First
watch that guy,
Primarch
the
of
Six
the
Flags
First
guy.
Legion. He was cast very
Yeah.
far from
Yeah.
Terra after
fuck.
the Primarchs were
I think
sucked
last
up from
year.
the Emperor's laboratory and
Heresy.
against the
Last
wall.
year, 3 years
He
ago,
landed
they
on the
actually put on
forest
things
world
Six
of
Flags.
Caliban, a planet vibrant with
They
life
say
but
commercial
touched by
mascot died.
chaos. He was one of the most strategically minded Primarchs, but was considered grim, arrogant, and secretive by his brother Primarchs. The Lion's growth capsule came to rest in a remote part of Caliban's forest, far from civilization, but deep within the woodlands that were touched by chaos. Any other person would have died in minutes, so deep into the forests, let alone just a newborn child. However, the Primarch was no ordinary human, and within moments of emerging from the tank, he had the appearance of a young child, past infancy and heading towards their teenage years. There, with no one around him, he survived. His instincts and thoughts implanted by the Emperor keeping him alive as he aged rapidly. A decade after his arrival, he was found by a group of humans, knights led by a man named Luther, who wore crude power armor left over from an age-long past. The knights would have killed the man as chaos tainted, but Luther sensed something in him and spared the Primarch's life. Taking him back to their fortress monastery, Luther named the boy Lionel Johnson. The Primarch quickly adapted to the world of man and the customs of their lives. He learnt extremely rapidly. Soon it was as if he had been born amongst these people, living and speaking as they did. He also quickly began to show his tactical brilliance, acting quickly and showing determination in his actions, rising quickly through the ranks of this knightly order, with soon both his and Luther's name being known throughout other orders on Caliban. However, he never did share what happened to him in those 10 years within Caliban's forests. Also, ironically, they undertook in a great purging, or crusade, against the chaos-tainted beasts of their lands, using the recruits their order had gained with Lion's fame to push back for the first time the domain of these beasts, easing the fear of Caliban's people for the first time in generations. Within a decade, the planet was actually free of the beasts, and Lion was made Supreme Grand Master for his achievements. Although proud of his young friend, it could be said that this moment may have sparked a jealousy in Luther that would come back to haunt Caliban in later times. Now, not long after the cleansing of the beasts, the Emperor arrived on Caliban, receiving word from his scouts that one of his sons had been found. After the pair met, Lion was immediately given control of the First Legion, made from his gene seed, and they were named the Dark Angels, supposedly after an old Caliban myth. The older knights, including Luther, were given genetic manipulation to fight alongside the newly created Astartes recruited from Caliban, although they would not be as strong or as fast as these newly born legionaries. Although some tried to fight the changes from knights to marines, including trying to assassinate both the Emperor and Lionel Johnson, their failure only strengthened the unity of this newly formed legion. Now, during the Great Crusade, there were many victories made by the Dark Angels under Lion's leadership. However, Luther, Lion's second-in-command, still harboured jealousy over his friend's position. This jealousy nearly led to the destruction of the Legion's flagship and caused a rift between the two, leaving Lion to send Luther away, along with a force of Caliban native marines, sending them back to Caliban itself, ostensibly to train new recruits for the Legion. However, Luther's jealousy told him that he had been exiled and deeply resented this treatment. Meanwhile, Lion went from victory to victory in the crusade. However, his stoic nature and self-admitted trouble with understanding emotion led him to not being considered for the position of War Master. When Horus was appointed, although deeply disappointed, thinking of his legion status as the first qualified him for the status, the Lion accepted Horus getting this role as the Emperor's favoured son. In fact, it was a similar attitude to Lehman Russ, ironically. Now, the reason for that is that the Lion and Lehman Russ had a tumultuous history. Now, Lehman Russ was the Primarch of the Space Wolves, but the Space Wolves and the Dark Angel's Legion converged to jointly assault a world that had insulted the Emperor and had begun sacrificing to a demon. The ruler of the planet even called Russ the Emperor's lapdog, leading this fiery Primarch of the Space Wolves to promise to remove the leader of the world's head from their shoulders personally. He wanted to immediately lead a full frontal assault on the leader's command center himself, which would cost much life, but would allow him to seek his revenge. However, the Dark Angels were already in preparation, with the Lion having planned a strategically brilliant assault on the compound in order to minimize the loss of life and maximize the potential damage. The Dark Angels' assault went ahead before Lehman could object, and the Lion personally slew the leader on the high walls of his own compound. Enraged by this, Russ confronted Lion after the battle and struck the Dark Angel's Primarch on the head. The two of them fought for a day and a night, beating each other to a standstill. Russ even laughed during the pause in the fighting, finding the reasons for the fight humorous to himself in the end. However, the stoic Lion was not amused and struck whilst the Space Wolf's Primarch was laughing, knocking Lehman Russ unconscious. When he finally came to, the Dark Angels had left, moving on to other battles. Finding the act dishonourable, Russ swore that he would avenge this slight, and from then on, the Primarchs fought whenever they met off the battlefield, later becoming an honour duel between the members of each chapter. Some say this brought the two chapters together, others say the hostilities between the two has sometimes even led to bloodshed. Now, moving back to Caliban, it had been 50 years since Luther's exile, and it was discovered that the Chaos Beasts had returned to the planet. The people began to feel that the Lion had abandoned them for a greater role in the Crusade, which Luther did nothing to quell. When Horus rebelled, it was discovered that warp sorcery was being used to resurrect these beasts on Caliban, possibly by order of Horus himself. However, rather than fighting these sorcerers, Luther decided to align with the treacherous Warmaster to take his revenge on the Lion, stirring up the trouble with the people and making them seek rebellion against the Imperium. Now, during the heresy, the Lion tried to deny the Warmaster access to the siege weapons he would need to assault the palace on Terra by taking the forge world of Tiamat, who had a store of these weapons. The Lion believed that if the Emperor was safe in the Imperial Palace, Horus would never win the title as Master of Mankind. However, after securing the weapons, the Lion was deceived into giving them to the Iron Warriors, who had quietly sided with Horus. The Lion saw a chance to become Warmaster if Horus was cast down, so traded the weapons to Perturabo, who was the Primarch of the Iron Warriors, for his future support if a new Warmaster was to be chosen. The Lion then left Tiamat to rejoin the rest of his legion elsewhere, with the aim to move on to Terra afterwards. However, the fleet encountered demons and was forced to reinstitute the Legion's librarians who had been disbanded following the Council.
You can't look up while you touch.
After gathering his forces, the Lion was confronted by Conrad
while your tongue is out. Oh, fucking asshole. You don't want to get the joke, dude. I bet you money you don't want to get that. It's a stupid
The Lion returned using
it's a stupid joke where you
to overpower the Night Lord's fleet. Curse escaped into the bowels of the Invincible
Fuck
Reason,
you.
the Lion's flagship, and killed all parties.
How you doing, Clay?
The Lion spent 16 weeks hunting the Night Haunter himself, but found no trace of him. As the Reason pursued the rest of the Night Lord's fleet, they were confronted by more demons, including Carrios, Fateweaver, Ezekiel, Lord of Change, who tried to convert the Dark Angel's Primarch to the
How you doing, Clay?
However, the Lion believed that loyalty brought its own reward, and the demon found no purchase for its treacherous words in the Lion's stoic heart, eventually being impaled through the heart by the Lion himself. Eventually, the Lion was able to make it to Ultramar, being unable to reach Terra. There, joining the Blood Angels, they briefly
hello?
the Imperium,
Is someone alive?
from which Lionel Johnson was declared their military commander. However, sometime later, the siege of Terra began.
Too much
said, I'm too much for you to handle.
Oh!
Come sit in my face, punk.
You know where he's at right now.
Yeah.
However, on his arrival, his fleet came under attack from his own defense batteries. Luther, who had sworn loyalty to the forces of Chaos, had poisoned the minds of the natives, saying the Lion had abandoned them. The Primarchs were tainted.
So Clay, have you seen my yeah, you seen my TikTok account yet?
The wrath of his fleet on the planet, destroying Reducing the world's defenses to nothing, the Lion personally led the attack on the enemy's stronghold. There he found Luther consumed.
I went to put some like, oh god, you're on TikTok, the world's an end, the world's an end.
They fought, combat leveled the fortress around them. The might of chaos.
What are you talking about? I already killed Johan inside.
The planet too.
Hey, don't get mad, you know that's true.
With earthquakes felling mountains and the great forests burning to cinders as the hardened forces of the Dark Angels destroyed their home to end its evil. Now, the physical fight between Lion and Luther was eventually ended by psychic assault from Luther.
I'll win while feeding Lila, and yes, I have.
His former friend fall,
Okay.
Luther was suddenly snapped back to his senses and was unable to land a killing blow.
I'm with feeling life and
jealousy.
oh yeah, well life's only good if you don't get it ripped out of your freaking skull.
The failure of their servants sent a massive warp storm to ravage the world of Caliban. After the bombardment, the world was so weakened that the planet cracked like glass, being ripped apart by otherworldly energies of the warp. Only the Monastery of the Order, where Luther and the Lion had fought, survived as a single structure, and only then because of the massive force fields that kept what remained of its foundations intact after Luther and Lion's titanic battle. Within the ruins of what now is a battered asteroid, the Dark Angels found Luther mumbling, driven mad by his actions, saying that the Lion had been taken by the Watchers in the dark, and that he would one day return to forgive Luther of his sin. They found no trace of their Primarch, and so decided to make the asteroid their new home, christening it the Rock, the Fortress Monastery of the Dark Angels. Those Dark Angels who had been converted by Luther to chaos, or who had joined willingly, were sucked into the warp and were scattered throughout space and time as the Fallen. And of the Lion, a very select few know that he still
I'm still waiting to get this when I get 100 subscribers on Facebook.
In the dark wake him, he will fight in the final
Facebook?
battle of the Imperium.
Oh, on YouTube. Sorry.
He's the only Primarch who is
Sorry, I'm out of it.
still living within the Imperium.
You all know what I'm waiting for once I get 100 subscribers on YouTube. We all know what the day it's going to have.
Which sounds exactly the same, but if you take
You might want to pause that.
and last name and put it on the first name.
I want to get 100 subscribers on YouTube. Just get this song played on me. The Venomite distance. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting for that. That's my goal. Get 100 subscribers and get debated.
And then he spreads the word.
You need to watch this.
I came here to do two things and two things only. Purge heretics and steal property. And I already stole your property, so let's do it.
Among Us while RP as Warhammer 40k characters.
Oh fuck, Among Us.
Yes.
One of us is a traitor. Not me. Pop, pop, pop. What he said? We said, who's the traitor? He went, not me. That means he's automatically guilty in my opinion.
It's him. It's always Clay. He's not here. And we're all the way to in the room.
Welcome to the grim darkness of the future, where fun isn't allowed, happiness is banned, peace doesn't exist, and there's only war.
Abandon reason. No, only war.
In this war, it's us versus them. Us being the Imperium of Man, led by the almighty Emperor himself.
There is no shelter to those who oppose the Imperium of Man.
And them being anybody that isn't us, for the sake of simplicity.
Cabardlet said, one of us is the heretic.
Clay, since he's on the computer talking to us.
We'll just call them
It's Clay.
And what's the only thing defending us from them, you might ask?
Space Marines.
Genetically modified, just like the vegetables in the grocery store, only instead of staying ripe for long periods of time, they're crafted by the Emperor to purge heretics. We're talking 2 hearts. We're talking 3 lungs. We're talking night vision. We're talking 8-foot tall, 800-pound monsters
except orcs, and Eldor, and Dark Eldor, and Necrons, and Tau, because nobody likes dumbass weirdo space communists. At least they aren't trying to eat us like the Tyranids.
Glossing over all that lore that you don't need to understand.
Bartlett said, I only frame everyone set up an alibi and kill troublemakers.
I think we have a rival. It's me versus him.
Space Marines are the Ultramarines. Or if we're being honest, Ultra Smurfs that are charged with exterminating the orcs on your manufacturing planets that are stealing your shit. How important is this shit that they're stealing, you might ask?
Strategic value, absolute.
So I'm guessing that's pretty important then.
Strategic value, absolute.
That doesn't make things any clearer for the audience.
Strategic value, absolute.
You occupy the role of Captain Titus, a soft-spoken junior officer voiced by the legendary Mark Strong, that's joined by an OG sergeant and a turbo-nerd subordinate named Leandro, that constantly hounds you about not following a dipshit rulebook called a codex.
Is that why, Captain? The codex was started not to support this action.
Shut the fuck up, Peter.
To be perfectly clear, I beat the entire game once in its default state and had so much of a blast, I beat it again immediately afterwards, only with mods out the ass. So instead of playing as a calm and collected Crit Marine, I played as a Flood Marine, which, if I'm being honest, was a slightly different experience. So if you're about to write this video off as heresy or confusing, I understand. I just grew up playing an RTS called Dawn of War, and would rather play as a Blood Raven than an Ultramarine Smurf Blueberry.
None of this is really important unless our purging and also spoiler alert transitions are weird.
The orcs invading your planet and trying to steal your huge-ass Titan tank are a super diverse bunch, ranging from cutie little orc children that shouldn't even exist. Hey, get back here. Don't run away from me. Why do you even exist? All the way up to the orc war boss Grimskull himself, who was basically Shrek in his final form.
Over around your Pizza Hut. What the hell?
Get the new $10 tastemaker.
Are we throwing our peas on Thursday?
Equally as diverse the weapons at your disposal to eradicate them with, from a dinky bolter pistol all the way to a heavy bolter. Because when it comes to orcs, the caliber you're firing can never be too high.
I'm gonna need a heavy bolter for this heresy.
The quickest way to purge through scores of orcs?
Melee.
Getting up close and personal is not only the fastest way to cut through a horde of orcs with single, double, and triple hit combos, but believe it or not, it's how Space Marines heal. Yeah, that's right. So Draconian, they don't need to pick up health kits, because the enemies are the health kits. Just crump some poor orc, mash your stun key until an orc skull pops up, and execute his ass for a speedy and convenient health boost. Your melee weapon of choice is a trade-off between speed and damage. Like the chainsword is agile and great for cutting things, while you're also simultaneously already cutting things, but it's less potent against heavy armor.
I'm cutting things even though I was already cutting things.
On the other hand, or rather, with both hands, the Thunderhammer hails as awkwardly as a bus, but it also hits like a bus, running a stop sign in a school zone.
Hey, yo, Mark, are you Elon Musk? I'm about to send your ass to the outer
And you've got a power axe in between those two extremes. And I can't explain why, but it feels like you're competing in a figure skating / rhythmic gymnastics competition.
Bartlett
Use it, and I'm
said,
oddly okay.
Chainsword or bolter, only pick one you can own, also fully functional.
Train sword.
I think it's on the target's about vegetables.
You can melee 3 times and mash stun to curb stun multiple enemies and choke slam any motherfucker still standing. So it's safe to say that when it comes to this move, the Emperor most definitely does approve.
I said, cease! I think I stunned too hard and stuck in the terrain. Brother, I'm stuck in the terrain. Where's Captain Diomede when you need him? Brother, I have pinned here.
Eventually, you'll realize you can't just slice your way through the game. Chaos Marines and their pedantic piece of shit leader me from.
Numeral.
Noise cannot defeat me! And you'll need to start firing guns if you want to survive. Or more specifically, bolters. Bolters rise! If you call this thing an assault rifle, I'm gonna break your arm. Because it may be used like an assault rifle, only instead of firing a 223 the size of a crayon or a 308 the size of your finger, it fires a 998, which could actually be a 75 caliber or even more. That's essentially like firing a self-propelled can of Red Bull that explodes after penetrating a target, making it almost into an assault rifle RPG hybrid.
How many fucking robots does this place have? Imperial Outpost or Amazon headquarters? I gotta get the pants with my prime.
You have downward variants and upward variants, like the bolter pistol in case you got something heavy in your hands, and my personal favorite, the Stalker bolter, which is the most satisfying sniper rifle I've ever had the privilege of using.
Just like Sesame Street, you ready? And 1, and 2, and not 3, not 4, 5. I'm really glad that all the orcs saw that are about to be murderers because that was embarrassing.
If you absolutely, positively have to expend as many rounds as possible, the Storm bolter does exist, which is like a double-barreled LMG that's cool for the first 5 minutes that you use it.
The rate of fire of the Storm Bolter? Perfection. The accuracy of the Storm Bolter? Just put him anywhere that's remotely close to the target. I don't really give a shit.
But better alternatives do exist, because the game gives you 4 slots consisting of a primary, secondary, long range, and
Kabardlet said. There are 2 I work with that want to beat me in Among Us.
Uh-oh.
Or are they me and Johan?
No, he said work with.
Oh, is it me and Johan?
get the standard bolter and stalker bolter from both
They have no clue who they're fucking with, yeah.
No.
isn't enough to stop a horde of orcs trying to
He's probably gonna pull a pro pepper trick.
crump your ass in outer space.
I'm gonna use your bolters for this heresy.
But once I started fighting the forces of chaos, I dropped the stalker for the last cannon, or laser cannon, aka the Space Marine Spartan laser. That was clearly superior, because here's me killing a chaos marine with a bolter.
The Emperor! I was starting to think he was invincible there for a second.
And here's me doing the same deed with a las cannon, slash laser cannon.
By the Emperor, that's powerful.
For your heavy slot, it's all about the Vengeance launcher, which fires sticky nades that you can personally detonate, because who wants to launch rockets when you can launch Vengeance? A Vengeance launcher. That sounds foolish. Even flame-bursting shotgun exists, but all of these specialized weapons rip through ammo at an incredible pace, so honing your bolter skills is the way to go.
Kabardlet said. Thinking of going Inquisition on them.
Oh, damn. Damn. They're fucked. They are super fucked.
They do not know.
Navigating the levels is obviously done by either running or rolling. Don't ask me how the hell these...
I think it's hilarious that we're just... Whatever. Hell.
Oh, hey, Claire, you free? You hungry?
Clay, are you free? Clay, are you free? Clay, are you free? Clay, are you free? I'm gonna keep doing this until I get a fucking response, by the way. Clay, are you free? Clay, are you free? I'm bored.
He's bored.
I'm insane. I got a like on that. Someone more said to me.
Oh, what you just said?
No, that's it, on that TikTok video I made about Tim.
You know about the Dwarf Barbarian.
Oh, that's still a great one. I'm gonna play it with him.
For people who tell me that D&D is fake and it's all fantasy, guess what? I got proof. I have found the first ever dwarf barbarian with a big fuck-off sword. Oh my god, he can wield it! Ah!
Kabardlet said. Can't decide if I want to kill them or frame them. Also not fully been a long day.
I'm gonna go over to his house and make it a long day. You know how I'm gonna do that? Go over there and just talk weird to his wife. as you guys called me, told me that was judgmental.
Ah.
Oh. Yourself. Can you imagine us in an argument with that? Damn.
What?
Damn. Dude, who posted this? Go Julian.
Oh, I'm asking about the Halloween thing. Because we're going to try to do that zombie RPG. Where you play yourself.
I play myself all the time, but anyway. Hey.
I got playing by yourself.
Oh.
Oh.
I'm keeping that. Fuck you.
But he's your wife.
No, that ain't Sue, dude. Look who that is.
Oh, okay.
It is the name of the writer of the poem Dark Angel. There we are. So, that's everything I wanted to say on Lionel Johnson today. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below or send me a personal
Don't know,
message.
work is getting weird again.
Well, thank you for listening
Work
today.
is always weird.
See you next time on the Vaults of
You
Terror.
got me for a guy that works with you. They call it hell. They call it hell at that point.
No. If you worked with Clay, they'd be like, okay, go to our complaint department. Why do I see a crazy fucking redneck with an axe? That's a complaint department. Go outside to them.
Hey. I can't be a redneck. I can be ballsy, but I can't be a redneck.
Was one of the 20 Primarchs designed by the Emperor. His desire to emulate the perfection of his father led him to hubris and his own downfall, being consumed by a demon of Slanesh. Now, the beginning of the story say there were
The reason I'm thinking, every time he's making a noise, I'm thinking, like, if he gets laid, is that the noise he's making?
And it took shelter in an abandoned factory where they came across an ever-shifting mass of light. One of the workers, named Salax, was wary, but another, named Corin, felt it was safe. He watched light form into a perfect boy, touching his mind
said,
so to learn everything
want
he knew.
masks,
Salax
distancing,
wanted to
but
kill
also
the boy,
put us
a
close
drain
together
on
in a
resources,
small
but
space.
Corin refused, and the
Same
Oh.
with COVID.
Oh, so you're in the Navy. Gotcha.
no guilt over saving this perfect boy. A stream of pure water erupted where the child had first landed.
He's probably
and
gonna get so little
Corin
thing
named
about
the
that.
child Fulgrim after the water-bringer of Chaos' creation myth. His early years were spent as a lowly factory worker, fulfilling his quota with ease despite his young age. He was even quick to grasp the technology being used and quickly
Do you know what I find funny?
to increase production.
My first TikTok video
By the time he was 15,
made like 2 hours after, 2 days after,
his factory fortress home.
got 476
There he
views.
learned his planet's
Kabardlet
decline and decided he would do
said,
all in his power to
elbow
save
cock.
his homeworld. Now, with his leadership, Fulgrim
Elder
sent
God.
his engineers
Yeah.
to distant mining outposts,
But
repairing
my second one, the one with the body pillow, has 488. It is 12 higher than my first.
easier and making Kallax even more prosperous and resource rich. With these new machines and new recycling measures, Kallax had a surplus for the first time in memory. With this surplus, time was freed for a re-emergence of art and culture.
What the hell is that? It moved. Bath Bruce. Someone's gonna look and be like, what the fuck's wrong with this guy?
And 50 years after his emergence, Fulgrim, still apparently young and
Okay.
the ruler of Chemos. Soon after this
It's right there.
word arrived to
Oh my
spread
god, the light is bright.
sky. Now, the soldier police of Chemos, known as the Caretakers, assembled to repel the strangers, but a memory stirred within Fulgrim, and he ordered his men to stand down. Soon, Fulgrim was confronted by the soldiers of this interstellar empire, their arms and armor finely crafted with finely penned scrolls hanging from their pauldrons. Not only were these men well armed, and technologically advanced, they were civilized and had access to the arts that Fulgrim desired. With these warriors came another, greater than all the rest, named only the Emperor of Mankind. Fulgrim needed only to look on him before kneeling and offering his sword.
Do you want that to be a good joke? I'm gonna pull someone this.
said, let us make a George YouTube wiki.
Oh.
I don't know, that's a good idea, but whatever.
But this known a ship for the Third Legion
No, Joe, I thought it'd be a funny thing we could do. Do you remember how you got the in some of the 40K bases you got the thing where they're underneath giving shit to rocket? You want that to be a funny joke? You get like a Necron scroll, like a Necron skeleton, and you put it on him doing that, and we call it teabagging. Like he's doing Halo. Yeah, cause it's definitely me doing so.
He had shoulder-length hair of fine platinum white, large friendly eyes, and a mouth that always seemed ready to smile. Dressed in the finest armor that could be found, and wearing a fine, high-collared cloak, all of which would become a signature look of Fulgrim. It was a small,
so much more yellow.
compared to the other legions.
Just that?
And scarabs. Yeah.
Like, I was even scared. Fuck, we really got to throw away.
Inspiring and awing the men before him, offering them his respect and his guidance to grow into a legion of renown and great valor. From that moment, his men loved him, cheering his name as his speech ended. Even the Emperor, quietly watching this gathering, was impressed and even moved by the strength of Fulgrim's personality, even in the face of this adversity. So he gave Fulgrim a gift, giving him leave to name his legion the Emperor's Children.
Okay, so I need for now. The clip will give him stuff for you. Get you.
And from Fulgrim to his father,
oh, the last page. Gotcha.
leave to use his own twin-headed Aquila symbol as their own.
Oh, what?
It was a great gift, but with this honor, the seeds
52, 51, 53, 54, 55, 50.
that his legion should live up to the
I don't get
honor
it.
of this name and reflect
There's
the
5 bases for this shit?
himself. This
6 bases?
perfection soon encompassed everything in the legion.
Yep, and they're all, I think, Terminators.
Culture, so
I'm gonna go well, let's get his own theater.
in their small numbers, Fulgrim and the children reside in the same fleet as Horus and
1, 2,
wolves. Fighting alongside his
3.
brother with his larger legion, the children eventually developed the numbers to fight alone. Of all
There's
his
a fuck up
brothers,
here,
Fulgrim
eh?
was closest to Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands.
Oh, it's my fault again.
Imperfections in the form of his silver
And that is?
arms and hands.
Okay.
They both tried to create a perfect weapon at one point, with Fulgrim creating the
Which ones do you need?
Breaker, and Ferrus the
Decided.
sword Fireblade. They exchanged
How many of those do you need? I'll just do the rest.
the Legion's friendship. As the crusade came to a climax, the Emperor's children acquitted themselves
5,
well,
6,
fighting in multiple
7,
theatres and conquering many worlds of the Imperium, with Fulgrim even acquiring a trophy from the field of battle, a xenos manufactured sword, recovered from a Laren temple known as the Silver Blade of Lair. Soon this weapon became Fulgrim's preferred weapon over the Fireblade, and with our hindsight we can see it was the source of Fulgrim's future. Now the sword began to affect Fulgrim's mind, and also the troops who had accompanied him to the planet to detect this blade had also become tainted by chaos unbeknownst to them. Now, it was at this time that Fulgrim met Farseer Eldrad who attempted to warn Fulgrim of the incoming Horus heresy. However, Fulgrim's friendship with Horus was second only to that of his friendship with Ferrus. Spurred by the Silver Blade's corruption, Fulgrim attacked Eldrad, destroying a venerable Wraith Lord and an avatar of Cain, and then, with Eldrad's escape, Virus bombed several Eldar-making worlds to repay them for their treachery, as he saw it. Soon after, Fulgrim met with Horus in person, demanding an account for his actions. However, Horus was able to use the corruption within Fulgrim to sway his heart and allow chaos to worm its way inside, igniting a hatred for the Emperor, who Fulgrim now saw as withholding his perfection from the rest of the galaxy. He set out to meet Ferrus to try and sway him, but their meeting did not go well and ended in conflict. Soon, almost all the Legion followed Slanesh and Chaos over the Emperor. A desire for perfection became a lust for hedonism, and Fulgrim's mental state began to decline rapidly, talking to paintings and killing civilians at mere slights. Now, Fulgrim and the Emperor's children were at Istvan and participated in the Dropsite massacre, where Fulgrim fought with and defeated Ferrus with Forgebreaker, the weapon he had given to his favoured brother. This weapon and his own, the Fireblade, wielded by Ferrus, was shattered, and Fulgrim took up the Silver Blade to end it. But he could not kill his brother, for a piece of his heart had not been corrupted by chaos. Unfortunately, the demon found within the blade exerted itself at this stage, taking control to strike Ferrus dead. This shock of seeing his brother murdered at his own hand managed to shock Fulgrim back into his senses, and he was horrified by his and his legion's actions, seeing betrayal and carnage all around him. At this moment, the demon made Fulgrim an offer of oblivion to rid him of the guilt and pain, and in his weakness, Fulgrim agreed. The demon took Fulgrim's body as his own, and imprisoned Fulgrim's mind inside itself, within a warped prism represented by a painting of Fulgrim aboard the children's flagship. Only Fulgrim's brothers of Horus, Logar, and Magnus recognized Fulgrim as possessed, and the Warmaster only kept him alive because it was useful to do so. However, later Fulgrim managed to regain his body after a long drawn-out ruse to see if his sons recognised it, and trapped his possessor in a painting of himself. However, after his release, Fulgrim said that he had had to use Warcraft to escape, and so decided to use Slaanesh, his full loyalty, at his own free will, seeing it as preferable to returning to the Emperor's side, where it was likely that death would become his entire legion, including himself. Now, later, Fulgrim joined forces with Perturabo of the Iron Warriors to find the Angel Exterminators, which they would use to tip the heresy in Horus's favour. They travelled to the Eye of Terror, where, after surviving an ambush and a usually fatal headshot, Fulgrim arrived with Perturabo on the Crone world of the Yadris. After fighting with Wraith Lords and Wraith Guard, Fulgrim betrayed Perturabo and tried to flee the fight. His brother chased him and arrived in a specific chamber, where Fulgrim revealed there was no Angel Exterminatus, but that Fulgrim was destined to become it. Infuriated, Perturabo attacked, but Fulgrim used a Malgator stone, given to Perturabo as a gift earlier, to drain the Primarch's power. With this, Fulgrim revealed that he would use this power to achieve apotheosis, otherwise known as an ascension to true demonhood. However, Perturabo interrupted the ritual before it was completed, and then they both were attacked by a Salamander, Iron Hand, and Raven Guard ambush. These legions who had stalked the traitors since Istvan, seeking vengeance for the massacre. The stone was shattered, and Perturabo was able to regain some of his power, striking down Fulgrim with his Thunderhammer. However, he was only able to destroy Fulgrim's outer shell, and his soul was reborn physically as a massive serpentine demon prince of Slaanesh. Vanishing with his children into the warp, Fulgrim promised his brother that they would meet again. Fulgrim appeared in several subsequent battles after this, showing his new demonic and psychic powers. By the Siege of Terror, the whole of the children had been thoroughly corrupted by chaos, running rampant through the streets of Terror in an orgy of violence and carnal decadence. Billions died far from the true siege at the hands of the children, and were even taken as experimental subjects for the Legion, to test drugs, fuel pleasures, host demons, and save the loved ones. Now, after the heresy's defeat, the children fled to the Eye of Terror, leaving depopulated worlds behind them as they took their people as slaves. And the children even raided other legions with fresh blood. Finally, the legion shattered into hedonistic, fanatical warbands, whilst Fulgrim was gifted a world of unlimited pleasure by Slaanesh, with his last appearance being to slash his brother Rubute Williman's throat with a poisoned blade. So that's everything I wanted to share today. Thank you for listening. If you have something you want to share with me, please leave it in the comment section below. If you want to speak to me directly, you can send me a personal message and I will respond if possible. Thank you for listening today. See you next time on the Vaults of Terror.
Behold.
Behold!
Hello,
Yeah.
and welcome to Vaults of Terror. My name is
The fuck is this little shit?
Hey,
Hey, I'm the only one that'll be retarded here, fuck off.
Perturabo. Now, he and the Iron Warriors in general had a natural way with technology exemplified with their cold-blooded actions, but they were never able to give any faith to any cause that logic did not favour. Now, being scattered from the Emperor's laboratory after the Chaos plucked him away, Perturabo came to rest on the world of Olympia. He was found climbing the mountains below the elevated city-state Olokos. Realizing this child was not normal to be climbing so high, the guards brought him before Damikos, tyrant of Lokos. Intrigued by the child, Damikos made Perturabo part of his family. However, Perturabo was cold and logical, even at a young age, and never trusted his adopted family or the Olympians at large. Even his name, Perturabo, was not as expected. It was not the name of one of Olympian's lost heroes, as was typical of the naming habits of the nobility, but was a title for the ancient ones who had prestigious abilities. Now, when he had grown enough, Perturabo waged wars for his adopted father, warring right across the city-states of Olympia, designing and using the technologies previously unseen on the world to lay bloody siege to these mountainous fortresses, gaining vast experience as he warred across this world. He dominated most of the planet and earned the title as the Lord of Iron, a brutal and commanding presence, purging his enemies both externally and internally. He was loyal to his adopted father, but did not prevent Damikos' excesses, which would have hastened him towards his demise. However, in his time, Perturabo also suffered in secret with troubling visions of the Eye of Terror, although he did not know what he was seeing at the time. He did not admit this to anyone, seeing it as a sign of weakness. When his true father arrived, Perturabo immediately swore fealty to the Emperor. Returning with his father to Terra, he ended up spending much of his time with Magnus the Red, the only other Primarch Perturabo could have called a friend amongst his brothers, as they both shared a desire for learning and knowledge. They both discovered secrets about humanity's past beyond the Age of Strife, and Perturabo particularly came to admire the fragmented works of Leonardo da Vinci, connecting them with another man of science from an age-long past. Of all the Emperor's sons, Perturabo was one of the most interested in sciences and the knowledge of technology, having the most subjects of any of his brothers. When Perturabo took command of his legion, however, he was unhappy with their past performances and decided to use the ancient practice of decimation as a punishment, with 1 in 10 legionaries, chosen by lottery, being beaten to death by their comrades, showing the true brutality of his nature. Many of his brothers objected, most notably the Primarch of the Ultramarines, but Perturabo was unrepentant in his ways. Now, when it came to the Great Crusade, the Iron Warriors fought across the new and expanded Imperial frontier.
We're trying to get to
They
the
were
other one.
masters of siege warfare and rivaling the Imperial Fist's knowledge of sieges. They also constructed and garrisoned fortresses across the worlds they conquered, although Perturabo resented splitting his legion into smaller chunks. The constant siege warfare also wore the legion down mentally and emotionally. After a time, their joy of combat became just a joy of slaughtering their enemies after the siege lines were finished. Now, Perturabo was efficient and skilled, but also brutal, bitter, and riddled with envy for his brothers, especially Dawn, who had constructed the apparently perfect fortress on Terra, which Perturabo was convinced would be easily breached by his better tactics and forces. Now, Perturabo was known as a dark Primarch, even by his allies, and it seemed that a large portion of his expeditionary fleet was also made up of seriously grim and dangerous individuals. It appears that even before the Horus Heresy, some of the Primarchs, such as Perturabo, had a darker nature which could not be contained.
So what about this?
The true reason for Perturabo's love of Horus during the
Okay, so you guys sit these two walls off, but you can just put on that base.
Grinding siege warfare and the darkness that had gripped the Iron Warriors since Perturabo took command led them down the path to chaos. Some say it was actually Horus who was the one who orchestrated this constant conflict and led to the breaking of the Iron Warrior's spirit, but whether this is true or maybe it was just Perturabo accepting the darkness that had tainted his past and his birth, it was hard to say even with hindsight. Now the final straw came when their homeworld of Olympia rebelled, shattered back into rebellious city-states. The Iron Warriors returned from a war with the Hrud, the Xenos race, and began to purge their own planet. It was only when the monumental piles of his people's dead burned in pyres that blackened Olympia's sky that Perturabo realized what he had done, how far he had fallen. He knew the virtual genocide of his people could never be forgiven by the Emperor.
Claire, you're playing Ghost of Toshiba with...
For his dedication to his duty. This straw shattered the iron resolve of the Legion and the Primarch. He made his decision and tried to absolve himself of his own guilt by joining with Horus, first secretly, then publicly declaring himself during the Istvan drop site massacre, when he turned on humans and slaughtered them. At the end of the massacre, Horus presented him with the Forgebreaker, the thunder hammer made by Fulgrim for Ferrus Manus, taken from the battlefield and given as a gift to seal Perturabo's loyalty. Now, after the first siege of Hydra Caudatus, where the Iron Warriors broke and savaged a fortress of the Imperial Fists, Perturabo was approached by Fulgrim to help him gain unimaginable power in the form of the Angel Exterminatus. Now, the details of this event can be found in my Fulgrim video, but needless to say, Fulgrim betrayed the Iron Warriors Primarch and used some of Perturabo's power to gain ascension into the Demon Prince.
We got this done. So, like I say, the only one we have left are the orc things, but since I have to start home, I'll just knock out when I get home. Other than that, I hope you all did enjoy this mini series, I guess you can call it, of us fucking around. Okay, so it puts it down and everything. It's in there. So, what?
No, it's off.
What do you mean?
The camera.
Camera? No, it's not off yet. Well, we're going to just go and call it there. We got it all done. Good job. Thank you. Now we're going to go ahead and end it. So catch y'all later. We're going to end this. Bye.
Off.
No, it is.